Thank you for joining Mature Conversations. We are live on Facebook.
Awesome. So excited to have everyone tonight and welcome to a very important conversation. We all know we're going to get older, right? And it doesn't have to be, oh no, not at all. This is an excellent opportunity for you to get your questions in and hear from a panel of experts and advocates that truly believe that aging can be a beautiful process. But like many things, you have to plan. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Mature Conversations Part 1, checking all of the boxes while living life like it's golden. And that's an emphasis on golden. Welcome tonight to this virtual event. I'm Shana Thornton, on-air executive producer and host for Let's Talk America Radio, a national award-winning podcast. And we've got one amazing lineup for you this evening. We're going to talk about the finances. We're going to talk about your emotional health, as well as what does it mean to age. And we're also going to talk about your physical health. Of course, that's so important, but there's so many different aspects to aging and aging gracefully and thriving. You know, we know that 50 is young, right? It's often stated in many pop culture songs or statements that 40 is the new 30 or 50 is the new 40. And so true. But we've got to be intentional about making sure we're living a life of success. And
Yeah.
success, of course,
they were
for
okay.
many people.
Okay, that's all. Yeah. It won't matter. Now she eats all her meals.
Thank you. Just had a little technical concern there. And we're certainly excited for all of those that are joining us, watching us live on Facebook. But thank you for our Zoom participants as well in the webinar. So thank you for being on with us. But we have to be intentional about aging gracefully, right? So we all know there are many stereotypes to aging, but what we all know is it's a blessing to get older. And we want to be wiser. And that's why educational forums like this that are engaging and interactive make all of the difference. I'll let you know for sure that this is your panel tonight, and they're here to answer questions. And you're going to be truly impressed and truly motivated by those that we have with us tonight. But first, we want to kick off and certainly acknowledge the individual behind all of this. She was a visionary for this. It's the one and only Sadiqa Gibson. So excited to have you on, Sadiqa. I know you've spent over 20 years as a consultant with senior living. Obviously, you have certified in administration of helping run operations and activities concerning our very precious aging population, which we all will be one day, of course, God willing. But such an important topic. Why was it so important for you to bring this to the forefront and really get the right people together and making sure the right questions were being asked?
Shana, thank you so much for that question. And you know, the impetus for bringing this group together is the fact that the group that are 50 plus is a very growing group in America. And we are in that group where our bodies are changing, things are happening to us emotionally, we're still working, we are managing families. But our life is changing biologically in so many different ways. Some of us are still managing children and our adult children, young adult children. And then we also have parents that we are caring for. So we've got a lot of balls that we're juggling in the air. So it's important to have a conversation about it. And I thought it would be a good idea to bring in the experts, those who actually work and have been trained in the various areas to kind of talk to us about it, to let us know that you may have a lot of balls in the air, but you don't have to manage them all at one time. And so I'm very appreciative to the ladies that you're going to hear this evening, and I hope you get a lot out of the information, and I hope you share the information with others.
Thank you. And what a great introduction and a great cause behind this. You mentioned the S word, sharing, and sharing is caring. And if you're watching us live right now or on replay on Facebook, we do ask that you tag someone you love, right? Someone over the age of 40 years old, for them to go back and make sure they're listening to this conversation and get all the information from this panel of experts. And we'll kick it off introducing that panel, and you're going to hear from them firsthand. First up, we have Kimberly Underdew, and she is an acclaimed licensed social worker who's been in the industry for over 2 decades. And I know, Kimberly, you have worked with an array of individuals of different groups, and certainly a lot of the emotional concerns that come with the different stages of life. Right. So you're with us tonight. Tell us in your own words in the next 2 or 3 minutes, why is it so important for you, someone committed to the industry you're in, to really make sure that people, the right people, are understanding the information?
Oh, Shannon, that's a great question, and thank you. Acclaimed. I love that. I love that. So again, I want to thank Sadiqa Gibson for giving me an opportunity in this platform. So I'm in this generation, 50 plus years. I won't say, 50 plus years. And I tell people all the time when they age, I call it the 3 R's. They can regret it, they can reflect, or they can reset. And so that's what I live by. And a lot of people in 50s, they spend several years regretting things, or they can reflect and gain that wisdom and share that wisdom on to younger people, or they can also reset. And so I'm in the reset stage of being in my 50s. Like the song says, living life like it's golden. And I just want to tell people in this sandwich generation, because 50 to me is the new 20. 50 is the new 20 for me. That being 50, and I'm also 50 with a 16-year-old. So all the implications of that. A lot of us are having children later in life. And I tell everybody, children will keep you young and keep your mind sharp. But this is important because this is the period that we don't really practice self-care, because we're taking care of our parents, and then we're taking care of our children, because I have friends that have children the same age as my son. And then what we don't do is we don't take care of ourselves. So as a mental health therapist and advocate, I spent most of my time working with children, but most of my clientele right now are between that 45 to 65 years of age. And so I hope that answers your question, why I'm so passionate about it, because I'm in this particular age group.
Thank you so much. And your passion certainly shows. And you're right, it's personal for all of us as we certainly age gracefully, no matter where we are in that aging journey. So thank you. And stay tuned, everyone. We're going to hear more from Kimberly Underdew, of course, acclaimed certified social worker. And she has been working with so many groups and doing such great work. So we thank you for being with us. Get your questions in. This is your opportunity. You have a panel of experts sitting in front of you. So don't miss the opportunity to ask a social worker one-on-one, a financial guru one-on-one, and also a medical doctor one-on-one. All the questions you wanted to, with time, of course, being of interest. We're going to keep it moving right now. And I did mention someone that is an expert, of course, in the medical field. And that's you, of course, the one and only Dr. Shirley Jones. So excited to have you on. I know when it comes to aging, right, doctor, most of us go straight to the physical part of it. And many of us have heard our parents say from the age of 35 on up, your bones aren't what they used to be. I know you are very experienced and trained, of course, in treating very many chronic conditions. Tell us how when we age, that it doesn't have to be such a gloom of doom mentality, because as Kimberly said, we're going to live our life like we're golden.
Yes, well, thank you, Sadiqa, for inviting me to speak. I started a preventative health solo practice, focusing directly on aging gracefully. I'm also part of that group, but I'm a little bit older than all of you all because I'm part of the 60 group. And so aging gracefully, there are three things you have to first pay attention to. It's your mind, which, you know, Kimberly Overdue talks about it, your body, which I can help with that, and your spiritual being, which is also tied to your finances, because, you know, all of that works in together. So the mindset actually helps you to age gracefully. You have to get your mind around, it's like wine. I'm aging, I'm getting better. And so I need to change my mindset for living longer. Not when you're younger, you're just going by day, you're thinking about everything you want to do, but you're not really paying attention to your body and respecting your body. But as you get older, you have to change your mindset as I'm in it for the long run and I want to be healthy, happy, and successful and living a golden life.
I love it. So it takes all parts to get us there. We're going to hear more from the one and only Dr. Shirley Jones. Thank you for being on with us. Again, get your questions in early on the chat if you're on the Facebook page as well. We are highly encouraging you to tag a family member or friend for them to tune in, okay? Please do that so they can hear this important information tonight. We're going to check all the boxes as we live our life like it's golden. Of course, you are watching and witnessing Mature Conversations Part 1, and so excited to be on tonight. And right now, I'm going to introduce our final panelist, last but certainly not least, and she comes with a wealth of experience when it comes to, of course, talking about money. And it's the one and only Melissa George. And Melissa is a CEO. She is a boss, and she's a certified specialist in our things. Melissa, so excited to have you on tonight. You are the money lady. Of course, people have many questions. We are living longer than our previous generations, which means we likely would need more funding, if you will, to keep it going as well. Why are you so committed to this important conversation? And we know it matters for everyone, but for a lot of women, particularly who may often outlive their spouse or partner.
So thank you, Shana, and thank you, Sadiqa, for having me. I also want to thank my guest panelists as well. I'm so honored to be on this panel this evening. So I'm passionate about this for many reasons. Yes, we are living longer. Many of us will actually live to 100. And what's happening is people are wanting to retire sooner, and we're living longer. So that means we need a bigger pot of money to sustain us during our retirement age. These things are really critical for a number of reasons. We've heard from Kimberly and Dr. Jones talk about our mental mindset, what's happening with our bodies. And I'm certainly not here to say that money solves all problems, but it can certainly help with quite a few of them. And certainly as we think about aging, something that we all need to think about is living long, dying soon, or living impaired. That impairment could be a physical impairment. It could be a cognitive impairment. It could be an accident. It could be a sickness. And so what happens with most of us is if we're in that type of scenario, we want to be able to have choices. And sometimes money gives us the choices whether we want to stay at home as opposed to having to be in some other type of facility. So when we think about living life golden, yes, we all hope that everything is going to go great. We're going to have all the money we need. We can travel. We can do all those bucket list items that we want to do. We can spend time with our kids and our grandkids. But for some of us, we have to start thinking about the realities that it may not always go that way for us. So we want to plan for all scenarios, whether things go well, whether things go bad, and everything in between. And so that's one of the main reasons why I'm passionate about what I do, is trying to make sure that people have a realistic plan for themselves in retirement. And how do we do that? How do we get there? And then once we get there, how do we make sure that we manage those assets so that we can retire with confidence?
I love it. And confidence, what a buzzword. I'm sure we're going to hear that more tonight. Thank you, Melissa, for being on with us. Love your passion. So look forward to that conversation, which can be awkward, but one that's very necessary to have. And I do want to welcome you if you're just joining us, if you're watching us on replay. This is Mature Conversations Part 1. Of course, checking all the boxes as you live your life like it's golden. If you happen to be watching us on replay, we came up in your feed somehow. Also, if you happen to be with us on the webinar here on Zoom itself, we do encourage you to reach out to others through text messaging or however you would like to reach out to them and let them know to watch us on Facebook Live, okay? Certainly do that. And that page will be Golden Guide to Living Your Best Life. Again, that's Golden Guide to Living Your Best Life. And you're going to find the live feed there on replay, but certainly go to that page, like the page, and also share this important conversation. You know, Kimberly Underdew, of course, you're a social worker. You've worked with many different groups. You've seen a lot of emotional and mental concerns. When we talk about aging, so much of it, and you know this, you and I've had conversations previously, so much of it is a part of healing, right? And that so many different groups, people as individuals go through trauma. But as we age, Kimberly, right? What happens to the trauma? And I'm not trying to water down the question, but should we assume that, well, that was 30 years ago, that was 45 years ago that the father walked out. It was 25 years ago that that brother hurt that other brother, and time will just heal it and they'll move on. As we age, is it fair to say that everyone gets better with age, or sometimes the mental or emotional capacity can somewhat worsen?
You know, Shayla, that's a very good question. And trauma is all the buzz as far as the mental health industry is. And, you know, back in the day, people thought that trauma was just basically those who served our country and they had the PTSD and the trauma of war. But it has since evolved and into other things: trauma from a car accident, trauma from abuse, trauma from a bad relationship. And so trauma has expanded itself and has redefined itself over the past years. But what I find, Shayna, excuse me, what I find, Shayna, is that if you do not address your trauma, it will still be there. And it'll be something that happened when you were 10 years old, and it may come all of a sudden, something triggers it, something reminds you of that trauma. And at age 55, it's like it was yesterday, like it happened an hour ago or it happened 2 hours ago. And so when it comes to trauma, it's something that we constantly have to work on. And so people can have traumatic events like a car accident, or people can have sustainable events like abuse with trauma. And so I tell people in my therapy practice that when you work through trauma, it may take years and years and years to work that through. And it may be that you never fully work through it, but you learn to cope and handle it. And so I never tell people they're cured from it, because there's no such thing, but they learn to live with it, cope with it, and learn from the trauma and be able to be a testimony to others if they choose to do that. And so we as African, I got to put this in, we as African American women, because most of us are, I see on this live feed right now, we have what you call generational trauma too. The trauma of my grandmother, the trauma of my great grandmother, the trauma of my mother that we pass on from generation to generation. That's just the historical trauma. And so that is a great question. Trauma is ever evolving, and it's something that I'm so glad that we're having mature conversations around it, that people are saying, hey, I've had trauma in my life and I want to get help. What kind of therapist can I get help from? And not all therapists are trained to handle trauma. So I want to tell people in the audience, do your research, find a therapist that has been trained, For instance, I'm not a play therapist. I rarely work with kids under the age of 6 because that's not my forte. So I would never indulge in that type of therapy, but I am a trauma therapist. So I want the audience to know, if you want to work through that trauma, do your research and find someone that has been trained in a trauma modality.
I love it. Thank you so much for specifying that, because I do think sometimes people will say, well, I'm progressive. I have nothing against therapy, but they will pull everything together, not understanding that therapists have specialties, such as physicians have specialties, right? So that's so, so important. Before we move along to our next panelist, Kimberly, I have to ask an important question. When you mentioned the trauma of different groups, and we know all cultures and all races experience it. But let's talk right now about the female, right? And we know that can be a topic that includes a lot, but maybe perhaps grandmother is watching us tonight, right? And she is 67 going on 70 years old. She's been through a lot perhaps in her life. And her way of coping is, I'm tough. I'm a survivor. It's a superwoman syndrome, if you will, even though she may not have tagged it superwoman. And she may be expecting that same mentality of, if you will, resiliency, a toughness, of not talking about issues from her children, in particular, her daughters, right? I mean, there's some evidence and studies out there that perhaps mothers can treat children different based off placement in the family and genders, but she has a lot of expectations of her daughter. And like no parent walking this earth, no parent's perfect, right? There are things that made mistakes at, perhaps even being impatient. And maybe if her daughter or son, but let's say daughter, comes to her and has not gotten over something from 25, 30 years ago, we all know those examples where the mother or grandmother now says, get over it, right? Life goes on, I'm tough. Or you start bringing up your trauma, right? And they start saying, well, I had it rougher. I went through this. I went through these types of things. Help us, Kimberly, and guide us and show us perhaps a model of how, even though we're aging, that doesn't mean that we can just say, I'm a superwoman, I did it, you can do it, get over it. Because like you say, people cope in different ways. And I dare ask the question, even though we have survived it, have we truly really healed, and are we truly okay?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Shana. And that's a very good question, because I'm sure that everybody on this panel has had that generational conversation with their mother and their grandmother and great grandmother, as well as their daughter. And I want to say, you're right. Our elders, we love them, but in their 70s, they say, get over it. This happened to me, this happened to me, and this happened to me. But they never really got over it, Shana. They never really got over it. So how they dealt with it is they picked it up, built it back in, and may have pushed that on their children, or they made their children not be a vessel to share things with other people. So I'm from the generation that's in between that. I'm in the sharing mode. So I want to say this, and Sadiqa knows this because we've been working with a lot of young women lately in their 20s, that college age women. And what I like about this generational Z, they're not afraid to say, I have trauma. They're not afraid to say, I need help. They're not afraid to say, hey, I got bipolar disorder and I'm on medication. So this new generation now, they're so free in letting other people know, this is my disability. I don't want to say disability. This is my different ability. And this is how I'm working it through. So I'm so hopeful with the new generation. And so I have a niece that's able to speak to my aunts who are 20 years my senior. And they have talked to them, look, Auntie, you got to be able to express yourself, live life. But I just don't know, Shana, with the older group of women, they've been raised and taught in such a way that it's very difficult for them to change that mindset. But what I found is they're being open enough to embrace their grandchildren and actually envy their freedom of thought and their freedom of expression. I know I do. I envy my niece. I envy young women, because I wish I was in that era of being able to be free to say, hey, I had depression for 2 years. I may have had to take some medication and it not be looked down on. So I hope I answered your question, Shayna.
Yes, you certainly did. Thank you so much. And I think you bring up a valid point that generations are certainly different and how we can connect and be inspired by even those that are younger, and not to always criticize, because so many people in their 30s and 40s will say, well, we were in anything like that, as if we were perfect, right? So we can all learn from each other. Speaking of learning, Dr. Jones, there's so much to be learned from a board certified physician such as yourself. Many things that I know you've heard this in your practice and experience, that men or women will say, well, I'm older now. It's not really a reason to go to the doctor anymore. And you know this a lot of times, and unfortunately it's a generalization, but men often don't go to the doctor, and women will go when they're younger because often it's childbearing years, right? But I've heard women, educated women, say, well, I don't have to go to the gynecologist or go to my internist anymore. I'll see them in 10 years because I'm done with having children or babies. Talk to us about some key screenings that we should be keeping in mind as we hit the 50 mark, if you will, and older, because it's not all hands off, you're 50, you're good to go, you're floating, right? I mean, talk about the screenings and how a lot of times our rate of cancer can increase once we get older.
Exactly. That's a good question. So, how I approach that question with my patients is I tell them, think about your car. So if you keep your car for, past the payment and into 10 years, how you maintain your car is you get your every 30,000 miles, you get your oil changed. You make sure you drive it, because if it stays in your garage, it will break down. So you make sure you drive it. You make sure you go and get, your windshield wipers checked. So your body is the same way. So as we age, the organs are getting older. We have genetic prevalence to certain diseases in our families that actually come out as you age. So you will not know about these if you stay away from the doctor. So the other issue is people say, well, if I don't check, I won't know. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's better to find it early and take care of it than not to. So with these screenings with men, you need to be screened for prostate. And the screenings are basically from the age of 40 to 70. If you're over 70, you don't have to be screened anymore. The purpose of our screenings are to get you to live to the average age of 80. But now, as our other panelists said, we're seeing people living well into their 90s, even men and women living well into. It's not so rare that you hear people having 100 birthdays. And so the thing is if you continue your screening, you can screen up to 70 for prostate. For colonoscopy is up to 70. For pap smears is actually after 65, you can stop screening. And the reason why the different age cutoff is based on when these cancers occur. You don't really find like cervical cancer in women that are older than 65. It's usually in sexually active 40 to 65. As far as breast screening, it only goes to 65 because usually, and it starts at 40, but we prefer 50. And so you can screen up to, now, if you have a high risk, a family, aunts, first degree relatives. So first degree relatives are your immediate mom, aunt, those people, and they have breast cancer, or even a father with breast cancer, then you should probably screen earlier. So that's a case by case basis. The other big screening we need to do over 50 is cardiovascular risk. Now, cardiovascular risk means what is my chance in the next 5 years of having a stroke or a heart attack? And so if you don't go, and it's actually, we do a blood test called a calcium score, and it will tell you. or we look at and see if you have diabetes, high blood pressure, whatever, and we can look at all of your, whatever is going on with you and give you, what's your likelihood? And we have the answer, how you can change that, but you'll never know if you stay away. Okay, does that help?
It certainly does. Thank you for sharing that. Until I went to the doctor, right? And that's when the issues came up. You know, Dr. Jones, I have another question for you. And you talked about some concerns that do affect females, such as cervical cancer, breast cancer. Of course, there's uterine cancer out there. For so many people watching this, maybe they're 50 years old and their mom is around 75 years old or 80. And when they are attempting to get some family history, right? I go in for my annual checkup to Dr. Jones, to your practice, and you say, well, do you have a family history of this, this, and that? Well, let me ask my mom. Let me ask grandmother. You know, and I know there are women in every culture and every group, if you will, that traditionally just have been taught you keep your business to yourself. Those are things that ladies go through, right? I remember my own grandmother, my favorite person in the world, saying, you know, they had female concerns. Yeah, no need to worry about what that is. So, you know, help us out as we're perhaps a younger generation if we're still in 30s, 40s, or 50, but we want to be progressive. We want to go to Dr. Jones empowered with information that, hey, uterine cancer runs in the family. There's a history of fibroids, endometriosis, you name it. But when we're asking mom or grandmother or aunt, our favorite aunt, about these conditions, don't worry about it. It's my business. Grandmother passed away of female things. No need to get into that. How can we break that barrier where, I don't want to say prideful, and people certainly have the right to be private, right? I'm sure as a physician you would agree, but there's one thing between privacy and one thing from helping empower our younger generations to live a longer life if they know there was breast cancer there, so they can tell Dr. Jones to start the screening prior to 40 years old.
So the big thing is to have the conversation. Females, one thing what's going on in our society today, and I'm gonna back up, is that people are really, with all the social media and everything, people are isolating themselves. We're not meant to be isolated. We're creatures, we're part of the universe, we're part of the earth. We all are intertwined in this ecosystem of health. And so a lot of people, they work from home, and that's all they see, or their immediate people. You got to create the conversations. You have to talk to the older people. And then the more you talk and let them talk, because everybody is so impatient today, they cut off older people. But you can't just go ask people about their women issues, you know, without having conversations. Because if you have conversations, then you start to hear, oh yeah, I went to the hospital because I was bleeding a lot. And then you could lead into, so, you know, what did that happen to your mom? When did you start having your cycle? And also to know the slang. So the slang is, you know, people say, oh, they took it all out. So a lot of times that means they had a hysterectomy, and then a lot of times you can tell from what age it happened. And then you could kind of move your conversation and questions to that. But pretty much you got to have conversations, and you can't just start off with those conversations. The other thing is when you can actually pull death certificates, and you can find out, because as doctors, when our patients die, we have to put the reasons. So you can always go to the Bureau of Statistics.
Thank you. That's a great way also to find out for perhaps individuals who parents were necessarily not in their life, fathers or mothers, right? And they still need to know, what did father pass on? What did mother pass on? Because it directly impacts you And so thank you for sharing that information. I promised you to everyone watching us that you were going to be educated and you were going to be empowered. And that's already taking place here on Mature Conversations, Part 1. What a great conversation. What a great panel of advocates and experts. And we're going to continue that with Melissa George. You know, Melissa, we talked about the emotional part, mental part. We talked about the physical part. And now it's the part that makes many, many people nervous. It's the money part. And, you know, Dr. Jones, who's a medical doctor, mentioned that more and more people are living to 80 and beyond, right? I mean, when I was growing up, to hear someone do 100 was huge on the news. And now you see it more and more, right? And so thankful that we're seeing that. But that also means we're living longer, which means, right, we still had a retirement age, right? Very few 100-year-olds or 80-year-olds are working. And so many of us, right, we've heard the things about Social Security, maybe to be around, maybe not. I'm sure as an expert, you're going to say you certainly need more than your Social Security to make it happen. For those individuals that are saying, I just don't make enough money, right? I haven't been able to do retirement planning like I wanted to. Help us out. Is it ever too late to plan for retirement?
Shayna, that's such a great question. And I'm often asked this because people come and start financial planning at different points in their lives. I would say it's never too late with an asterisk, right? And the asterisk is that it's not too late. However, people really need to be realistic and what that retirement looks like if they're starting late, right? The longer they have more time for their money to accumulate, for their assets to grow. But if someone is starting in their, mid to late 40s or their mid to late 50s, they don't have as much of a runway in front of them, as someone that's maybe in their 20s or 30s that's starting out. And so it's really important for them to not have these pie in the sky plans for what retirement is going to look like. And I know there was a time when we thought that $1 million was a lot of money. And if you're going to live in retirement for 40, 50, 60 years, it probably is not enough. So these are definitely important conversations to have. And it's interesting that you brought up Social Security. That is a big debate amongst the different age groups, right? I remember there was a time when I didn't think it would be there. When I get to Social Security age, and now I'm not that far from it, so I'll probably have it. But if someone's in their 20s or 30s, they may not feel as confident. The other thing is when Social Security started back in, I believe it was 1932, 33, the average person would retire at 65 and they would be dead at 72. So they would only live about 7 years in retirement. We all know, and we've heard from our other presenters, that people are living significantly longer in retirement. You also will notice that a lot of companies have been getting rid of 401k plans or defined benefit plans. Pensions are going away. And so it's really our own responsibility to be responsible for our retirement. Some of us will have, 2 or 3 buckets of money. Maybe we will have Social Security. Maybe we've had a 401k. But I work with a tremendous amount of entrepreneurs, business owners. And a lot of times the small business doesn't have a retirement plan. And so people really have to take it upon themselves to open some type of individual retirement account, whether that's a traditional account, a Roth IRA, a SEP IRA, and really start putting some dollars away. And even if they don't start out with a large amount, start somewhere, right? Start with a small amount and maybe ratchet it up every 6 months, every 12 months. I would tell people, just like it is with the 401k, once it's taken out of the check, you generally don't miss it. You learn to live without it. For some people, that might be taking on a second job or the side hustle, right? The side hustle to help put those monies aside for retirement. So there's a number of things that people can do to make up for some of those years. But the main thing is to be realistic about what retirement looks like. And in that, obviously, when people are thinking about, well, how much do I need? There's certainly lots of calculators out there that people can utilize. But really, I think to get the most accurate calculation, it would be to get with a financial advisor. So they're going to look at all the sources of income, and we're going to look at all the expenses and things that go out. We're going to look at historical rates of return for how the money is being invested, to tell them how, give you a best guess, a best calculation, a best number in terms of what that those assets will grow to, and then give you a better idea of how retirement will look for each and every person.
What a great point to make, and saying it does vary from person to person. But thank you for emphasizing the fact that so many employers now are not offering the pension that our grandparents and parents came to know, right? And there are just so many different factors that are not predictable. One of those I want to speak with you about is the I word of inflation. It's been in the news a lot lately. As you know, it's made it harder for individuals, right, to really function from day to day. How does inflation overall impact our retirement savings long term, Melissa?
That's an awesome question as well. And inflation has a significant impact on our retirement dollars. There's, a lot of time we talk about our rate of return, and then there's the real rate of return. And the real rate of return is the rate of return minus inflation and taxes, right? Because now we're really talking about our buying power. We can all think back, what was the price of gas 10 years ago, 20 years ago? What was the cost of a loaf of bread? How much was a stamp? I remember when a stamp was 5 cents, 8 cents. What is a stamp now? It's like 50 something cents. So everybody knows what the impact of inflation, but when we start thinking about our dollars that are being invested for retirement, they need to outpace inflation and taxes. So if inflation historically is running at 3%, and taxes, obviously that's going to vary from person to person, but let's just say it's 20%, we have to outpace both of those numbers in our retirement accounts in order to make sure that we're getting ahead, that we're actually accumulating assets for retirement. So inflation can have a huge impact. The other thing I wanted to kind of point out, I think everyone is feeling, could be positive or negative, all the interest rate increases that we've had lately. I believe there have been 11. And we're thinking that there might be one more before the inflation starts to go down. Well, the positive side of that is that, your savings accounts and your T-bills and things like that are probably averaging around 5%. And that's a good number compared to the last, 5 or 10 years. But the flip side of that is the mortgage rates are higher. The other thing is, for a lot of people, particularly in this age group that we're talking about, 50 plus, when we start having our portfolios to be more conservative and have more bond exposure than we do have with stock exposure, bonds have an inverse relationship with interest rates. And I've seen a lot of seniors lose money, a significant amount of money, in their retirement portfolio because they're so heavily weighted on bonds, and the interest rates have gone up, and they've actually lost money in their portfolios with bonds. And think about it. Most of us think that bonds are safe, but you can lose money in bonds as well. And so working with a professional that is doing those regular reviews, staying in tune with what's going on in the market to make sure that we may need to reposition some of those things, right? To make sure that we're not spent all these years accumulating assets, and then we start losing money right at the time when we really need it because we're not paying attention to what's happening in the market. So all that ties in. The inflation is a big factor. We need to outpace inflation and taxes in order to make sure that we're getting ahead.
And what a great concept you're bringing up that's, I think, so many people can relate to. For those that are investing or those who say they have the 401k, Melissa, I question how often they're checking in. They sort of ride it out and they come back to it. And you're right. And you may have said, I'm intentional about saving, but then you could have lost because you did not do a financial checkup with someone certified and obviously like you, who's able to really help guide them.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that. The last thing I wanted to say, and I know Kim wants to chime in on this. You just talked about what's that point that you just made about people not checking their 401k? They kind of do a set it and forget it strategy. We're like, oh, and here's the thing, because people in the 401k have money going in every 2 weeks, sometimes they have a false sense of their retirement dollars growing, right? Because the market can be going down, but they're putting money in every 2 weeks or every week. And so they still feel like, well, it's going up, or it's at least maintaining, it's staying level, but they're not watching it. But on the flip side of that, it's really important to understand that when the market goes down, which it normally is going to do, it's going to go up and down and up and down. When the market goes down, that's not necessarily a time to sell our positions, because really what's happening is the market's on sale. Now we know sales. We know when the Brahmin goes on sale, when the shoes go on sale, when things at the store go on sale. We love a sale, but generally when people start thinking about it in terms of their dollars, there's a disconnect there, right? they think completely differently about their money when the money is on sale, when the stock and the mutual fund and those types of things are on sale. And so there really is some important training that needs to take place in terms of how to allocate and position our portfolios so that in the long term, we're still going to be making money. And a lot of times that money is made because we're purchasing things when the market is down.
Thank you for pointing that out. This is a real conversation for real people, mature conversations. Part one, you got to stay tuned because I told you this panel is quite impressive and I think we all are learning. And if you're watching us live on Facebook or on this webinar here on Zoom, I know you feel the exact same way. Kimberly Underdew, I think you had something you wanted to add to the conversation.
I was just saying this is really a mature conversation that women, we need to have more often. And I want to say that the biggest and the fastest growing discipline in social work is financial social work. And it's a new discipline because we as therapists and social workers, if your money is not right, that's going to cause some depression in your household. If you're getting a divorce and you realize you really don't have half, you will have a fourth because you have really worked to provide for your family and that significant other may have done most of the work, then your finances are affected. That leads to depression. And so I want to say, even with the medical issues, I'm going through menopause. I tell my friends all the time, I blame everything on menopause right now because people sometimes misconstrue mental health issues with medical issues. So I think the most mature conversation that we can have this evening is to get your checkup. Get your medical checkup, get your mental health checkup, and get your financial checkup. Because what you think might be mental health is probably, it could be menopause or it could be another medical issue. So I just wanted to just put that out there that all three are intertwined. Because if my finances ain't right, I'm depressed.
No, thank you. No, and such a powerful point. I mean, and as you know, there's situational depression. There are different things that can trigger that. And to educate ourselves and to connect with individuals like yourself, Melissa and Dr. Jones is so key. Speaking of checkups, Sadiq, I did want to check in with you. Was there any check-in? How are things looking on Facebook Live or in our chat? Do we have any questions or concerns?
Yeah, actually, we have a question for each of the panelists. So would you like me to just kind of go down the list?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for Miss Underdew, someone made the comment that just as you stated, many people in our older community are shy about seeking professional help. Many of them will kind of lean on the Bible, lean on their faith, and they want your reaction. What do you say to that?
Well, I tell them the good Lord made social workers and therapists for a reason. And so, this age, this 50 plus age is very, it's a very precarious age because we just weren't really taught to share our feelings and our thoughts. And so I'm a praying person, but I know that the Lord made Dr. Jones to make sure that I'm physically okay. He made Melissa George to make sure I'm financially okay. And so self-care is all of the buzz and for a good reason. And some of it doesn't really, taking care of yourself mentally doesn't always mean you come to me. It could be running that bath water. It could be exercising. Yes, exercise has a direct relation to your mental health. It could be hanging out with good girlfriends who give you good advice. Okay, who give you good advice. And so, because people in our community, they'll say, you don't need to go to the older folks like me. You don't need to go to the crazy therapist. You ain't crazy. You don't need that help. So I think it's very cumbersome on us and maybe another mature conversation to really break down those barriers of seeking mental health treatment. So, hey, I believe pastors are giving good therapy right now because they duly train in mental health and pastoral counselor. And so there are really, really good Christian counselors out there for those who are seeking that treatment.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And then we have a question for Miss George. You mentioned our young folks and the fact that they have kind of a longer time to prepare than, of course, I do. The other part of that is so many of them are working the gig economies these days. And so they may not have the traditional 401ks to rely on. How do you suggest they prepare for retirement?
Thank you, Sadiqa. I will tell you the number one thing that I think a young person, and really older people should do as well, but the Roth IRA is so powerful for a number of reasons. Yes, people are not getting a tax deduction for it in the current year, but the money that they put into that Roth IRA grows tax-free, tax deferred, and then they pull it out tax-free. Let me tell you why this is super important. Taxes are not going down. They're not going down for a couple of reasons. First of all, we got a tax break during the Trump administration that is set to expire December 31st, 2025. So come January 1st, 2026, taxes are going up. Then when you think about the 6 acts that we had during COVID, the Secure Act, the Infrastructure Act, all the different things that were done with the government support to support small businesses and support individuals, the stimulus checks, all those things came at a cost, and that cost was over $4 trillion. Somebody has to pay for that. And the way that the government gets their tax base is primarily through taxes. And so having a pot of money that is not going to be taxed is enormous. It's huge. Even for people that have a 401k, they can still make contributions to a Roth IRA. You're now starting to see companies that have 401ks that now have a Roth provision in the 401k. But for that young person, at the very minimum, if they don't do anything else, I would strongly encourage that they open a Roth IRA. And if at all possible, try to max it out every single year. They will really feel the impact of that when they retire and don't have to pay any taxes, federal or state, on all of the dollars that are inside of that Roth IRA.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for that, because I'm sure there's a lot of people, even older people, who were not aware of that. So thank you for that. So Dr. Jones, we know about what the big 3, cholesterol, diabetes, and hypertension. And we've got some people out here who are on medications for all of those. And they're saying, hey, is there a holistic alternative? What do you say to that?
So now you're talking down my alley.
Okay.
So most people do not realize that 98% of our illnesses are self-induced. It's from what we eat, it's lack of exercise, and it's lack of social and mental health. When you eat the wrong foods, the processed foods, the fast foods for years, because we're talking about plus 50 age. So that was 50 years you were eating the wrong foods. You're basically causing high blood pressure because of all the salt, all the processed foods. And these are things that your body can't actually, get rid of these because they're toxins, they're poisons. They clog up your arteries. And so one thing you can do is switch your diet. Pay attention to your diet, because I mentioned about it earlier, is that when you're young, your body bounces back and you're able to do things, and your body doesn't care how you treat it. But if you continue to treat your body, it's like driving an old car across a lot of bumps. Eventually, the car is going to be squeaky. So you have to be just respectful of your body, because we only get one. just
Mhm.
as you respect other people. You have to respect what you put in your mouth. And you should do mostly, well, I promote vegetarian and veganism, but if you have to eat meat, it needs to be meat that's not processed. It's not have all the fertilizers and all of that, more organic. Um, watch your carbs, watch your eat green vegetables. Another big thing that people do not realize that affects how bad your diabetes, your high blood pressure, and all of that is our environment. So if you don't get sleep, it throws your body into a stress hormone is produced, which causes you to hold on to fat, which
Mhm.
causes you to be insulin resistance, which means it makes your diabetes worse. A lot of people don't understand that sleep is like our superpower. You need the 8 hours. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I just can't go to bed before 12. So let's talk quickly about melatonin. And as animals, we're made on circadian rhythms. So as the sun comes up in the morning, it releases a hormone that tells your body to stop producing melatonin, which is the hormone for sleep. So it wakes you up. As the sun goes down like that, your eyes see the light, and then melatonin is produced around when the sun sets. But what happens is we come home at after work and we have all the bright lights on, we have all the screens on, we have all the cell phones going, and then we get ready to go to bed and we're checking our phone, we're checking our email, we're watching TV, and the light is telling your brain do not produce melatonin. So you can't
Mhm.
sleep. And so then people go and try to buy melatonin, but you just
Mhm.
actually made your brain suppress it. So all these things actually play into how well you can become healthy, because you can heal your body. Because once again, as I said, 98% of the diseases are because of how we treat our body, what we're eating, lack of exercise, lack of water, and putting in a lot of processed things and all the light, and it's just a lot. But I have patients that actually have come off their medicines that are diabetics, don't have diabetes anymore. And the other thing we need to talk about is weight.
Mhm. Awesome. I'm
Yes.
intrigued to learn more.
Yes.
I'll probably be messaging you to share
Please
some
do.
books and other resources to learn more.
Please do. And there are not a lot of natural um, supplements that you can take, but it has to be, you can't just go buy these things. You have to talk to someone who's specialized in it so they can help you, because they can't interact with if you're taking diabetes medicine or high blood pressure medicines. Okay.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Shana, I'll
What
pass
a great
the
conversation.
baton back to you.
Thank you so much. What a great conversation. We certainly appreciate your vision to allow this panel to take place. And for those of us, if you're watching us live, thank you. If you're watching us on replay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Tag a family member or friend in the comment section. Let them be led to this conversation and they can watch it over and over again, because education is so key and we have to have it to be able to apply it and to make a real difference. You heard Dr. Jones say you can't heal your body. So no matter where you are right now, right? If it's an emotional space, if you haven't had the conversation you need to break barriers or heal from the trauma, or if you haven't saved enough, if you haven't, you're saying, hey, this is the weight I've been for the last 20 years. Each one of these experts on this panel believe that it's never too late to make the difference. We're going to close up in the next few minutes, Kimberly, but as a licensed social worker, I do not need to tell you that the C word of COVID changed the world forever. And there's so many studies that have been done, so many more that will be done. I am so convinced that in 100 years, we'll look back at COVID when it initially hit in 2020, and there's going to be so many things that came from it. I don't need to tell you, though, that social anxiety has worsened, depression, so many other concerns that therapists, mental health counselors, social workers have witnessed in the schools with our youth, but also with adults. Kimberly, close out and help us, someone watching right now, of saying, I haven't quite been the same emotion since COVID. Maybe they lost their parent. Maybe they lost a relationship due to COVID. Maybe they lost finances. There could be so many things that came from COVID, but help us out right now, because I think when we talk about healing in 2023, we can't leave out COVID, and we'd be remiss because it's not responsible to act as if the deadly virus did not impact cultures and communities everywhere.
Thank you, Shana. That's great insight, because we really don't know the long-term ramifications of COVID. COVID was a blessing, meaning opportunities came out of COVID. Unfortunately, sometimes when there is a crisis, there are also, and I heard this from my mentor, Dorothy Irene Height, when there's a crisis, sometimes opportunities come. And so opportunities came certain ways. We kind of pivoted during COVID. And so, and I'll give you a case example. 80% of my clients are telehealth. That means accessibility has happened. People don't have to walk into a traditional office. So those individuals that are suffering from social anxiety, who don't have the gas to get to an appointment, who don't have the mental state to leave their house at the time, they can get on a screen as this in Zoom and see me. They could see a doctor. They could see a financial planner. And so with COVID and our children, besides the educational depletion, a lot of our kids are just still catching up. A lot of our kids missed out on certain traditional things like prom and graduation. We just don't know the long-term ramifications of COVID. And people may say, smack my hand by saying opportunities, but we have to face it. There were opportunities to serve more people and serve people differently because of COVID. So I tell the audience out there in Facebook, replay, that if you need mental health treatment and you just don't know, there is the Georgia Crisis and Access Line that you could reach out to. They will connect you no matter what kind of insurance that you have. It's called GCAL. If you got Blue Cross Blue Shield, they'll connect you with the therapist. If you got Kaiser, they'll connect you with the therapist. And if you don't have time, you can see your therapist via telehealth.
Thank you so much for those encouraging words, and certainly providing a solution to some common problems for some people. Kimberly, before we leave, we'd love to get, how can our viewers get in contact with you, a website or an email, so they can continue this conversation if they certainly need to or desire to?
Okay, so I'm Kimberly Underdew. I call myself the community therapist because I think every therapist needs to be in touch with their community through community service. So my office number is 770-389-9886. I run Underdew Social Services. I am licensed in 3 states, Georgia, Michigan, and Oregon. So I can see clients in those areas. And my website is underdewsocialservices.com. Email address, simple, underdewkimberly@gmail.com. Thank you, Shana.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the wisdom and pearls of wisdom that you provided tonight. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to move right along. Dr. Jones, of course, you have been so helpful tonight as well. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the C word of COVID with a board certified physician. No one knows the frontline barriers like a physician during that time and the devastation that did occur. Also, talking about the anxiety. Unfortunately, there is some data pointing that COVID, Dr. Jones, is creeping back. Certainly, we hope not to revisit what we did 3 years ago, but It's creeping up. There are things that are unknown. It's a different strand out there. Dr. Jones, help us out right now. Empower us, those that are 50 plus or those younger than 50, about what we should be expecting with COVID and the best way to protect.
Okay. I don't think I heard the end of your question.
Thank you. The best way to protect ourselves from COVID moving forward.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that question. So as we all know, COVID was gruesome. It was awful so far as health wise. Most of us lost a lot of people or know people that lost a lot of people. The government has come up with the vaccines. The new vaccine that's coming out that is to cover the new strands of COVID hasn't come out yet, but it should be out within the next month in October. So they're pushing vaccines. Now, on the homeopathic side, as you all know, that's me. I suggest if you have multiple illnesses, chronic diseases, and you're over the age of 60, I suggest you get the COVID vaccine, because the vaccine, what it does is it doesn't prevent you from getting COVID, but it does prevent you from ending up in the hospital and being very sick and possible dying from the disease. So usually people who get the vaccine, they usually just get a cold and they can handle it at home. And we also have antivirals that you can take to lessen your course, and it won't be 7 to 10 days. So one of the things I tell my patients homeopathically is you have to increase your immune system. These viruses, they come in our body and they are respiratory viruses. So we breathe them in. So you don't know where you pick these things up. You can get on an elevator, you can be at church, you could pass someone in the hallway, and you can breathe out their viruses. So prepare your immune system. How you prepare your immune system is to get 8 hours of sleep. 2, take vitamin C. 3, take zinc, do turmeric, elderberry, and put that as part when the weather starts to chill down and people start to gather in places, that's when you need to start wearing your mask. If you're going to be around a large group of people over 25 and there are people that you've never been around, now is the time to start wearing your mask. These viruses are cold weather viruses. So now that's why COVID is picking back up. And that way you can prevent, start wearing your mask around those people. If it's your family and you know where they are and you're working from home, you're pretty good. But definitely sleep and take your vitamins and be careful.
Thank you so much. We always talk about diet and exercise, but that third pillar of health is certainly sleep. It is rest. And thank you so much for highlighting that this evening on this important Mature Conversations Part 1. Thank you. Dr. Jones, you've been a wealth of information on so many different levels. Thank you for closing out talking about COVID. How can those viewers watching us from around the world this evening get in contact with you or learn more about your platform?
Okay, well, I'm Dr. Shirley Jones, and the name of my business is St. John's Direct Primary Care. And so you can, that's the email. So it's www.stjohns, not apostrophe S, JOHNS, directprimarycare.com. Or you can catch, and it's the same on Facebook. I'm on all of the platforms and YouTube channels. I give talks. You can call the office, 904-5, what is it? 349-567. Well, I don't know. Go to the website. I don't call my office. Sorry.
I was going to be really impressed that you actually memorized the phone number for your office.
Thank you, any Dr. of the social platforms, St. John's Direct Primary Care.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and for everything you've added to this important conversation tonight. And last but certainly not least, the one and only Melissa George. Melissa, we're going to close out on the theme of COVID as well. It did affect the emotional state and mental state of people, obviously the medical, the physical part, but also COVID did a lot of financial setbacks for people, Melissa. You know that, of course, being a financial expert on so many levels. If it wasn't divorces, because divorces did shoot up during COVID as well, or individuals leaving their job, right, the massive walkout, or if they were terminated or things were downsized, whatever the reason, a lot of people saw a hit in their finances. I don't need to tell you as well that they're saying that a growing number of Americans don't even have a savings of $500 if they need it for an emergency. So when it came to COVID, we're going to emerge out stronger. We're going to be more empowered because we've got the information from Melissa. What would be the great information, one piece of jewel that you would share coming out of COVID for those to keep us on the right track when it comes to money?
So I would say what COVID did for a lot of people is it really made them aware and awaken them to basic financial principles of always having 3 to 6 months of expenses. And a lot of people did not have that. And so I'm seeing a growing surge of people that are now trying to reset their financial house, make sure that they have the savings, pay down those credit cards, really look at where they're not being efficient in their budgets. And we the generations that are coming up with us now, everybody has a phone, they have Apple Pay, they have a debit card, it's a swipe, swipe, swipe. As long as that swipe is working, I'm not really concerned about where the money is going. But there used to be a time we used to write checks and we used to have a register where we were calculating how much money was left in the account and how much money we had left before the next payday. Those are not bad things to do, for people to have a budget, really to have a budget and see where their money is going. And so they can start planning for having that rainy day fund when those crises and things that come up, when the transmission goes out in the car, when the hot water heater goes out, those kinds of things, that we always have some extra money that we can pull. And there are lots of different ways that we can do that, but we always talk about having some type of emergency reserve fund. And maybe that's, for somebody, that's the empty credit card, the credit card with no balance on it. Maybe for some people, it is the home equity line of credit that is only used for emergencies. So there's many ways that we can do it, but I think it's important that people do plan for emergencies. This is probably not the last pandemic we will see in our lifetime, right? And I think that COVID was a huge awakening for all of us. We thought it was going to be 6 weeks, and it was 3 years. So I think we'll be better prepared for the next one that comes along, but that preparedness starts now. It's, and what are the things that we're doing now so that if we end up having to be in the house again for months, years, that we can plan for that and be prepared and not be scrambling like a lot of us were. And I don't mean just for individuals, but really for the business owners as well. A lot of business owners were not prepared to take advantage of all the resources that were out there from the government. PPP money didn't even have to be paid back. But if you didn't have your financial house with your business in order, you weren't able to take advantage of that. Grants were all over the place. Even to this day, there's lots of grants that are out there that are available for people wanting to start a business. And I'm saying this for individuals as well, because a lot of people started the side hustle and they want the side hustle to turn into their main source of revenue. And so there are grants and things that are out there to help them get their businesses up and running. So those are the things, some of the things that I would say that for whether it's somebody working for another company or somebody is working on their own as an entrepreneur, some things that they can start doing now to prepare for the next, whatever that is that comes, for them to be prepared from a financial standpoint so they can avoid the mental stress that Kimberly talked about and the physical stress that often manifests that Dr. Jones talked about.
Oh, what a great way to end this. You're so right. It's time to reevaluate. And thank you for pointing out the obvious. COVID-19 rather, may very well not be the last global crisis we experience. I heard several experts say that, because there are things that certainly look concerning in the next few years. Melissa, tell our viewers from all over the world, how can they connect with you to learn more about your services and what you offer and all of the wealth of knowledge?
So the easiest way is to go to Invest Her. That's very intentional. HER. F as in fiduciary and S as in solution. So I try to keep it short because I know those long emails and web addresses can really throw people off. But it's investherfs.com is the website. It's the same thing on social media, whether somebody's going to LinkedIn, whether they're going to Facebook. But on my website, my email address is there, which is melissa@investherfs.com. My office number is 678-218-4900, also on the website. And probably the most important thing that's also on the website is my calendar is there. And I do offer a 30-minute free consultation to anybody. I'm licensed in 14 states, so it really doesn't matter where people are. As Kimberly said, COVID came with some opportunities. And so it really allowed me to go from being licensed in 6 states to 14 states. So I work with people all over, and some people I may never get the opportunity to meet them face to face, but I can see them face to face via Zoom. So I hope that will be helpful.
Well, I certainly know you were helpful tonight. Thank you. Thank you. If we could give a virtual clap to all of our panelists, amazing Kimberly Underdew, Dr. Shirley Jones, and Melissa George. Ladies, you blew it away. You exceeded expectations, and you educated, empowered, and you motivated us. And I thank you so much for your time. I'd also be remiss if I did not thank and certainly acknowledge and hand the microphone back over to the visionary for tonight's program, the one and only Sadika Gibson, all that she does in the community. And thank you for being intentional about this topic and this conversation, Sadika, because I think so many times we face it, as Melissa referenced, when it's too late, when we think time, and we really need to be planning ahead of the time. Sadika, I'll let you close it out, but I did want to certainly acknowledge all that you do and mention quickly that you're the director of Best Life Golden Years Incorporated. And again, I did mention this before, you spent over 2 decades working as a quality healthcare consultant for the senior aging population. And you also have a certification in Master Health Administration. So we see why your vision was so on point. And Sadika, close us out with some comments, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Shannon. And on behalf of my organization, Best Life Golden Years, I'd like to thank the listening audience, and I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists for that awesome, awesome information. And of course, you, Shana Thornton of Let's Talk America. You were excellent, indeed. And we just can't underscore enough. As our panelists were speaking, I was thinking about a triangle: physical, emotional, and financial. All 3 legs come together. And that means that you need all 3 of these to actually live your best life and to live your life in a golden way. I would like to share that Best Life will have another educational session in November. And then in February of 2024, we will have our annual Caregivers Appreciation event. So please follow us on Facebook and Instagram for additional information. And as you can see, this month, September, is Fall Prevention Month. So I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that in closing. One of the things that we did not speak about a lot was exercising. And that's one of the ways that you can prevent a fall, by doing stretches in the morning, walking. If you don't have any weights, use some of those canned goods so that you can build up some endurance. That's a way to reduce your risk of fall. Someone talked about lighting. It's super important to make sure you have the proper lighting in your home. Quite a few of us have on glasses, some for fashion and others for vision. But it's important to see your eye doctor annually so that you can make sure your vision is as it should be to prevent a fall. So again, thank you all for listening and participating. It's been awesome, and have a very good evening. Good night.